Well, there's not too much to tell you about that either. It's sunshine for the remainder of the day. As we move on into the evening, mostly cloudy weather. Look for an overnight low tonight somewhere about 37 degrees, and our afternoon high, we're just a couple of degrees south of that right now. They're only expecting a high temperature today somewhere about 58 degrees. So that tells you that, things aren't going to be terribly warm today. That is the latest national news, traffic, and weather from the KSCO Newsroom. It's time now for China Watch Radio. China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
好，同学们，我们在轰轰烈烈的站起来，站起来。Ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't supposed to be this way. A couple of weeks ago, when he was crowned emperor of the Red Dynasty, he appeared to be in total control of all the Chinese people. Did you see how he dispatched the former president Hu Jintao in front of the entire party congress? Wow! And what about the power of his zero COVID policy? Locked the entire country down by welding their doors shut. Yes, Emperor Xi Jinping was in total control. But then something happened. It might have been the televised soccer matches from Qatar, wherein tens of thousands of whooping it up fans were having a time of their lives without any COVID masks. Freedom. Think of what all those Chinese who were locked behind doors welded shut must have thought at the sight of all those raucous soccer fans relishing in their unmasked freedom. Well, or maybe it was the thought of all those who burned to death in an Urumqi apartment building because they could not get past the doors welded shut by the Dabai. That pissed me off. At some point, 1.4 million Chinese came to the conclusion that the emperor has no clothes. Like Mao's Smashing the Sparrows campaign, zero COVID is now a thing of the past. And China has come to a fork in its road to the future. Yes. Welcome, everybody, to the Fork in the Road edition of China Watch Radio.
What was that, the famous Yankee, the catcher for
Yogi
the
Berra.
Yogi Berra said, when you come to the fork in the road, take it.
And that's what we're doing today. So, this fork in the road leads us to ask, will the Chinese allow themselves to be governed by an emperor who has no clothes?
Wow.
Or will they stand up to like the raucous soccer fans and demand freedom from the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party? That's the fork in the Chinese road right now. So welcome to China Watch Radio. There's no Susan Simon in there, but there's Bill Graff in here.
There is he, and I do want to just check something before we get too much farther down the line. I did not have, because I was reading the traffic from this studio. Jonty, you are there, right?
I are there.
Oh, good. I just wanted to make sure. Oh, and guess who else?
And David Welsh just walked in. Hello, David.
David, did your airplane pass?
Yeah, so far with flying colors.
Oh, good. David did some of the work, so we're wondering if the glue's going to hold.
Oh, yes. That and the paper clips.
Good. Well, right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're off to the races. We have some stories to work today. I'm beginning the first segment off with my look at how Hu has been warning China not to make an abrupt end to its COVID policies, but it's too late.
A little bit, done.
Yeah, so it's a fun story. Up next is David. And David has a story about...
Oh, the case of the WTO. So the World Trade Organization, it's very interesting, that China, of course, wants to play both sides against the middle.
Always.
As folks recall, when they joined the WTO back in the late 90s under the Clinton administration, the thought was that the Jiang Zemin administration would bring this prosperity into the country, and that the growth of prosperity would bring a stronger middle class, which would then embolden maybe the voice of the Chinese people to, have their government maybe more normalize, in terms of its behavior on the international stage, right? So,
save that story.
What's that? Oh, I thought
There
my
you
turn was
go.
the story.
He's
Oh,
just
no,
doing
it's not your
the,
turn,
the,
we're just
the
briefing.
intro cap.
Oh, all right.
But before you tell that story, I have a story
yeah.
about Clinton administrations before the WTO was signed, and it happened right up the coast here in Half Moon Bay. So, Billy, what do you have today?
So I'm going to talk about the United States. Now, talk about a little too late. This one strikes me as maybe that we're a little too late on this one, but they're going to try. The United States is welcoming leaders from Africa, where China and Russia are currently making inroads. Yeah. This is an interesting meeting with interesting implications and probably some fallout, which we'll get to in a minute.
Well, sounds like competition to me, which is always healthy, as long as it's healthy competition. Jonty, how about you?
Wouldn't it just be the most amazing thing if TickTock just went away?
TikTok just going away. What are all the teenagers going to do with their time?
They might have to, I don't know, ride bikes and skateboards and have conversations, and who knows?
Engage with parents and stuff like that.
Yeah, learn something. I don't mean to be too. There might be some valuable content on TikTok, but there's a bipartisan bill that is intending to ban TikTok because it's essentially a foreign influence operation.
There you go. Well, let's start it off then, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to pick up a story about how WHO, the World Health Organization, has warned China not to make an abrupt end to COVID, but it's, of course, too late.
That's rich.
It's really rich. So the spokesman for the World Health Organization warned the Chinese Communist Party about making an abrupt end because it'll be really, really hard, and advised against sudden lockdowns in general because they're just difficult to end. So don't lock everybody down because it's difficult to end a lockdown. And what you see going on in China right now
But
is
starving to death in your apartment, being locked in is not difficult.
I'm not laughing, but truly that is the juxtaposition in this particular
Isn't
story.
it, Billy? Yeah.
So after an abrupt end to the COVID-19, that's a very interesting comment, an abrupt end to COVID-19 restrictions. It wasn't like Xi Jinping gave an order and said, okay, everybody, we're going to have an abrupt end to COVID-19, zero COVID policy. He didn't say that at all. It really came from the bottom up.
People walked out of their apartments.
People
said,
just
we're not
said,
taking it
enough.
anymore.
We're done.
Yeah.
The emperor has no clothes. We're out of here.
Yeah.
Wow. Think of the face that Xi Jinping has lost in this extraordinary. But at any rate, the Chinese official in charge of the government's COVID policy says we can't keep track of anybody. We can no longer keep track of who has COVID and who doesn't.
We overwhelm the apparatus of the state.
Yes, everything is crumbling with respect to
Well, in all
COVID.
fairness, with a population that huge, could they really figure it out? I mean, really?
Well, they had it wired. Think of how wired they were.
As long as you don't disrupt the machine, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Once you get a few people protesting it and upsetting the apple cart, they really don't have control anymore.
That's right.
So this abrupt and complete about-face in the COVID zero policy has led to what? A panic. Because if you think about it, you've been told for 3 years that if you get COVID, you're going to die. And so all of a sudden, the government says, that's it. They take down all of their testing facilities, no more roadblocks, no more anything, no more reporting your PCR test to get into a grocery store. It's all over, just like that. So what do the Chinese do? Freak out. And they run to the store and get all the drugs they can because they're going to die. So major panic. Nobody knows what to do because there's no instructions coming down from on high.
And by the way, did you notice that there was a shortage of children's flu and cold medicine here in the United States and around Europe?
Yeah.
Well, my wife works in a health place. Said there's just the stuff's flying off the shelves. They can't keep it in
That's
stock.
what I'm saying. That's what I mean.
All of the
Zinc and vitamin D or B and everything else
Yep.
you need to take as a prophylactic against.
there you go. So, this is going to be very interesting when it gets right down to it, because many of the Chinese people are not vaccinated.
Yeah.
It's not like here where we've been all hounded into getting a vaccination. They weren't in China because the Chinese vaccine didn't work anyway.
Yeah.
So why get vaccinated?
Well, also, if you'll remember, early on, the symptoms and the symptomology of this COVID-19 was much stronger and much more viral, put people in the hospital a lot better.
Well, this is going to
than
be
it does now.
interesting. Without vaccination
See how
and
they
mass exposure, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
Will all those who are unvaccinated get COVID and die?
Well, eventually, that's what Fauci said on day one. It was right that everybody's going to get it eventually. We just need to adjust the rate of which you get it so we don't overwhelm the
Right.
hospitals.
The other question is, will the Chinese shrug it off and move on without much of a to-do about it? And think of the impact that would have. You mean we've been locked down for 3 years for nothing?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't nothing because I don't know about you guys, but I have several family friends who passed away during COVID-19. For me and for my family, it's a real deal. I mean, 5 really close friends gone.
Were they COVID or were they other?
No, they were COVID.
Wow.
And they were older
Yeah.
too, right? They were the high risk group.
Yeah, they were. A couple of friends of my dad's and a couple of friends of me and my wife, and they're gone. But one guy, the guy that really surprised us out of those 5 people that I know that died from COVID was one of my dad's friends who fitted my dad with his hearing aids and whatnot in Mexico, and he was healthy as a horse on Friday, and Sunday he died in a hospital in Mexico.
Wow. And that's a big problem in China right now, is that the flu season's on them. And so people are having temperature. They have these temperature clinics outside of hospitals. People stand in line for hours in these freezing temperatures.
So do you think their temperature by the time they get to the thermometer is actually accurate?
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's like standing outside in Minnesota.
But it's going to be very interesting to see the extent to which COVID impacts the Chinese population, because it will tell us a lot about COVID in general. And then finally, which is going to be the most devastating, flu or COVID?
Well, people forget, and we should probably remind folks right here that in a normal flu year, thousands of people die from the flu, which is it's so normal
I think it's
that
40,
we don't
50,000 people.
We don't even report that anymore.
What's that?
I think it's typically on a range of 40, 50,000 people.
Yeah, it's
die
a
of the
lot
flu
of.
every
No,
year.
I'm talking about a lot, thousands. When I say thousands, I mean
tens of thousands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lots
I
of
think
people.
we had a bad flu year not too long ago, within the last decade or so, that got up to, I think it was 80,000.
That's right. That's right, John T. Yeah.
And the funny part about that, John T, is during the first 2 years of the COVID-19, when everybody was wearing masks and washing their hands and staying away from people, the incidence of flu fatalities went way down.
Well, how about I catch up with myself when we get into WTO?
There you go. All right, John T, you're up. Or no, David, you're up.
So, as we were talking just briefly earlier at the top of the show, China's entering the WTO was a really big deal for a number of reasons with a lot of anticipation. What I found interesting is that at the time, obviously, their economy was nowhere near what it is today. You had most of the population was still riding around on bicycles, not cars. They had a lot of infrastructure that was never improved over the last 30, 40 years. So they entered as a status that allowed them to get additional favorable treatment, as they got basically emerging market status.
Sure.
And now that they're the number 2 economy in the world, they still have the emerging market status that, somehow the WTO, maybe it's from elite capture, who knows, is unable to wrestle away that title. And if there's ever a country that doesn't deserve to be labeled a emerging market, it's got to be China.
And, right now our government's looking at giving China billions and trillions and zillions of dollars
carbon offsets
as environmental reparations.
Yeah.
our money, our taxpayer money. Yuck. You know, I was going to tell you a quick story about before WTO.
Yeah.
There was an incident here on the California coast, right up the coast by Half Moon Bay.
Yeah.
And what it was is the Chinese sent a ship across the ocean filled with people. And they
I
ran
remember
it.
this was great. Yeah.
Then they ran it up on the beach.
Yep.
And it was like an artillery shell with people in it.
Yes.
Right?
That's the
And
shrapnel,
it disgorged people all over the place.
Hundreds and hundreds of people were pouring out of this boat onto the beach.
Yes,
I
and
remember.
it was right after that Clinton signed the WTO, and there it was. So
That was a
they
message.
have this most favored nation status now.
What's interesting is that they have been using this, of course, as a cudgel wherever they can. And as folks recall, we reported on this program over the last few weeks. We've actually stopped shipping critical semiconductors back to China that could be used for dual purposes. And of course, China themselves has a very immature chip manufacturing capability, compared to the West and to Taiwan. So they're now claiming that this is unfair treatment, that we don't send
unfair
these,
trade practice.
exactly
Yeah.
that we don't sell these chips or give these chips back to them, or the plans on how to build the semiconductors. The Biden administration has come out and said, look, the WTO is not the forum to argue about this. The reason why we pulled those back were for defensive purposes, not economic. So therefore, we don't recognize your complaint, in the
There you
WTO. But it'll still have to get exercised through that process, and we'll have to just see what the outcome is. But I hope
Do you
the
think that's
administration sticks to their
true?
guns. Do I think which is true?
Do you think it's true that the reason why the U.S. is restricting these
Yeah.
advanced semiconductors is in fact related to defense, or do you think that it's a geostrategic move?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
clever
Both.
excuse. Although I think, Jonty, I would tend to think that it's probably more of an overall economic defensive move, maybe than it is military defense. Although
I
the
think
military
it's
defense
an
is a,
economic offensive move. I think it's the USA saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, we can just blow up half your industries if you guys don't get these chips. So you better be a little nicer to
Yeah,
us."
I mean, the Buick Encore is pointless without the computer chips.
right. Yeah.
It was
mean,
an
really.
interesting email earlier this week from a fellow listener to China Watch Radio. He said, I have a friend that works at Gray Bears taking apart computer parts.
Oh,
Right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're taking all the chips
Mm-hmm.
and selling them to a wholesaler who's selling them to
China.
China.
Interesting. A lot of stuff gets to be pretty old. I mean, if you've got a 5-year-old, Intel or AMD CPU, I don't know how valuable that actually is.
Well,
but
but you could still use it in a non-critical use in a car that turns
Yeah.
signals on and off, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Actually, I think that the quality, the requirements of processors has gotten kind of to where a 5-year-old AMD is pretty darn smoking, and it actually retains a lot of its value.
That's true. There also is a lot of minerals in those chips, so there is they have very sophisticated operations to harvest, the gold and palladium and other little pieces of precious metal that are in those
It's
large
the
wafers.
China equivalent of taking your catalytic converter.
That's
Well,
right.
and they're not taking our cardboard anymore.
Well, they're also not taking,
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that used to be recyclable that it just isn't being recycled.
Well, do you remember we used to send cargo containers packed with garbage back
Yes.
to China, and they stopped taking a lot of that?
Please, recyclable
It
material.
never really was recyclable.
Exactly.
It never really was.
That's right, John.
Okay, Billy Graff, you're up.
All right, so I started out teasing this first part of the show. The United States now has asked leaders from Africa hey, come and talk to us. We'll hold the meeting and we'll talk about whether you should go with China and Russia or maybe us. And so this meeting was held in Nigeria. Nearly 50 African leaders and delegates have arrived from those African nations. The talks are actually in Washington, but they're pulling people from all over the place in Africa, and they're going to talk with President Biden. The centerpiece of a major effort to reset and improve United States ties with African countries. Why would this be happening, folks? Well, Africa has all kinds of natural resources. Oh my gosh, the Chinese might get them.
So what is Russia doing there then?
Well,
I mean,
because-
Russia has all kinds of natural resources.
But Russia, it parts of the year in Russia, you don't want to go outside. It's cold. You don't want to go dig the ground up when it's like cement.
Yeah.
So, hey, we can get stuff from Africa too. And and remember now, China and Russia are
Allies.
they're trading partners.
Plus, it's a
Well,
geopolitical foe. It's an opportunity to block us.
That's exactly what it is. The continent's
there's-
geopolitical profile has grown to be seen as a vital region.
Yeah. John Tees.
There's been a dramatic swing by my limited understanding towards the east in terms of Africa. I mean, they have had a bit of a adverse relationship with the various colonial powers for a long time, but there's I saw a video of thousands, tens of thousands of people in
I saw
think it
that
was-
video too.
was it Chad, and they're all
Was
marching down
Chad.
the street waving Russian flags,
That's
saying,
right.
Yeah.
"Putin, come and save us."
Well,
From what?
from
From the
us.
West,
From the West?
Yeah,
from the a-holes. Yeah.
yeah. We've been taking advantage of them.
Oh,
But
okay.
Africa didn't suddenly get incredible natural resources. They've had it for
Sure.
millennia, and the relationship since the end of the
I always
Second
wondered
World
how the
War
De
has been
Beers
pretty
company
abusive.
survived
Well,
down there.
Yeah. Well, in the last decade, for instance, Africa's geopolitical profile has grown to be seen as now vital, with the fastest growing population in the world. Let me say that again. You think India and China have big population? No. Africa has the largest, fastest population growth on the planet right now. Okay, so now they have a quarter of the 9.5 billion people on planet Earth. They have a quarter of all those people. Now, on Monday...
there's eight. We just crossed 8 billion. So it wouldn't
no,
be-
it's 9.5, projected to be 9.5 billion people.
in 2050 probably.
It's 2040.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, the Monday ahead of the summit, the White House announced plans to commit. This number is just staggering to me. They're going to give $55 billion in economic security and health investment into Africa over the next 3 years.
Wow.
Now, you do the math, 3 into 55 billion. That's a lot of money every year.
Whose money?
Be a fraction of what we've been pumping into the Ukraine. I
True.
got to kind of wonder if that's if investment in health brought to you by the
By
Bill and
Pfizer?
Melinda Gates Foundation. Yeah, Pfizer. Yeah.
You know. Anyway, I guess the conclusion that I came to when I read all of this information is this: we're trying to get ahead in Africa while being severely behind.
I'm wondering too. One of the questions I would have for John D is I wonder if there's political alignments that the United States is intolerant of military alliances that China and Russia are tolerant of, and I wonder if that's actually driving some of the switch of positions.
Well,
John, you
yes,
would know.
that's part of the game, because we won't tolerate anti-democratic regimes, supposedly. But
Supposedly
that in
is
actual,
the key phrase.
in practice, that's comical. It was actually Italy's new prime minister the other day absolutely tore France a new one, talking about how they had maintained this colonial relationship with West Africa by manipulating their currencies and essentially shipping all of their natural resources and wealth out of those countries in order to, prop up those desperate French people who only work for 30 hours a week. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in Africa. It's corruption. They always say corruption's a problem, but and then there's a sort of idea that corruption's a problem with the African people. Well, there was a coup not too long ago, and it was actually stopped. And on one of the helicopters was a member of the British royal family. I mean, at the extent to which the European powers are still playing the game that they were playing in the 1800s is, that'd be worth an episode.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, quick break, Billy Gaff.
Yes, we'll take a break and we'll be right back on China Watch Radio. Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
Experience the extraordinary. Travel with Shen Yun to discover 5,000 years of wisdom, beauty, drama, and humor live on stage. You're not just watching a performance. You are witnessing a culture reborn. Come see what the modern world has never seen. The beauty and wonder of China before communism. Coming to San Francisco, San Jose, and Berkeley, starting on December 26th. Shenyun.com/CA. SHENYUN.com/CA.
Hi, this is Deidre with Home by Zinnias, located at 262 Mount Herman Road in the beautiful new hangar building just behind the drive-thru Starbucks. We are ready for you for the holidays. It's the time of celebration, of having friends and family over. Perhaps you need a new dining room table or a beautiful set of linens to set the table that you have, or even place settings and dishware. We have it all for you, along with candles, beautiful art, lighting, mirrors, and all kinds of home accoutrements. Whether you need furnishings or other pieces, Home by Zinnias is a lifestyle store just for you to inspire what you'd like your home to be. Remember, Home by Zinnias is located at 262 Mount Herman Road in the beautiful hangar building.
Chef Ben here from the Back Nine Grill and Bar at the Pasatiempo exit, where we serve the very best house-ground burgers in Santa Cruz County and possibly the world. Come in Thursday for the Outlaw Burger and a pint for only $15. See you at the 9.
Hi, this is Dr. Duncan McCollum inviting you to join me 1 o'clock Saturday for McCollum Wellness Radio. I'll be discussing some of the latest trends in building your immune system. It used to be survival of the fittest. Now it's survival of the healthiest with the strongest immune system. Tune in so I can walk you through some of the best things that you can do to boost your immune system, reduce brain fog, increase your energy, and have an amazing life. Tune in this Saturday, 1 o'clock on KSCO for McCollum Wellness Radio.
We are back. This is China Watch Radio, and this is the Fork in the Road edition of the China Watch Radio. So
Carefully,
which direction?
say that carefully now.
Which direction do you think China will go? It's going to be a good one. Will the Chinese allow themselves to be governed by an emperor who has no clothes? Or will they stand up like those raucous soccer fans in Qatar and demand freedom from the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party?
Speaking of fork in the road, it was interesting what American companies, actually any Western company, is now going to have to be faced with in terms of the climate in China, in terms of manufacturing, what stuff gets repatriated. Now, does the chip situation, is that going to impact of manufacturing of sophisticated products in China? It's going to be kind of interesting to watch. But I thought kind of really as a prototypical example of what folks have to go through and how they've had to walk this narrow beam of placating the CCP in order to have access to Chinese markets and manufacturing capability.
The businesses, you mean? Our businesses going over there, yes.
Exactly.
Bow down, kowtow,
and then
kiss butt.
And say the right things to the West, that they're standing up and they affirm human rights and individuality and so on.
Yeah, but how can a company like Apple, for instance, say they're standing up for human rights when they're building iPhones in the most horrible conditions possible?
Well, I tell you what, why don't we ask Tim Cook?
Well, guys, before we go on to that particular fork in the road, maybe I could just have a second to talk about TickTock. I guess the lead-in would be twerk in the road, I guess is what TickTock would be. So
did you
Marco
say twerk
Rubio,
in the road?
Yeah. So I'm sure that's big on TikTok. So Marco Rubio has led a group of bipartisan folks, Democrats and Republicans, in creating a bill which is called, this is the name, Averting the National Threat of Internet Surveillance, Oppressive Censorship and Influence, and Algorithmic Learning by the Chinese Communist Party Act, or the Anti-Social CCP Act. arguing that TikTok is like a digital fentanyl that just it messes up people. It's totally addictive. You just can't stop scrolling down and looking at cute cat videos or whatever. And one of the things that people have pointed out is that in China, if you're a 14-year-old and you have TikTok on your phone, their equivalent of it, then it tells you all about how to do fun science projects at home, and
it's all wholesome and uplifting and life affirming.
Yeah, exactly. What a wonderful time to be alive, and it limits you to 40 minutes a day. Where here in the U.S., TikTok you can be on it for hours and hours and hours, and a lot of people apparently are. And the content is curated in such a way to, as far as we know, manipulate our society towards, lesser goals. So in the U.S., the biggest ambition of a young person today, in terms of their career, is when they grow up, they want to be an influencer. The biggest ambition of a comparable young person in China today is when they grow up, they want to be an astronaut.
Yeah, or a physicist or something, yeah.
Right. So we'll see what happens. Now, there's been some legal issues around the data itself, and the Biden administration has shown some concern about is the data being housed in such a way that the CCP is just scraping all of this information that it gleans from American citizens. And they've tried to work on some deal where Oracle hosts the data here. But to me, that's kind of not getting the point. The point is that this stuff is actually affecting culture and society and politics.
Kind of like fentanyl, right?
Not honestly. I think if TikTok went away, the fentanyl problem would be reduced, and it's not the other way around.
So I'm for it.
You're for what?
Oh, by the way,
I'm for putting wholesome content on kids' TikTok until they're 14 at least. I'm for following the Chinese on this one.
And actually, I would remind folks that as far back as when we still had a military presence in Iraq, we were warned against TikTok. In fact, at one point, the U.S. military forbid any service members from having TikTok on their phone because they knew that telemetry, they knew that they were able to track, they figured this out, the Chinese were able to know where key military forces were on the move and where they were locating, where they were bivouacked, based on the soldiers who were bored sitting around watching TikTok.
Wow.
Right, absolutely. You can get a heck of a lot of information. Things like if there's a lot of geniuses on TikTok who like to wave their guns around and stuff. So you've now created a database of people that you can geolocate, and you know exactly what weapons they have. I mean, there's an enormous amount of data that you can glean, and the way that AI is moving along at faster than we can actually think about it. It's data security is a big deal, and I do get that. But the societal influence is the other side of the coin, and it shouldn't be ignored. That said, they just leave TikTok because TikTok's gone, and they go on to YouTube and they post the same exact crap.
So let me just play devil's advocate for just a moment here. Can the United States government, as they have proposed, can you ban a company? Can you ban a product? I mean, really. I mean,
I really liked what Representative Mike Gallagher said in this regard. He says, allowing the app to continue to operate in the U.S. would be like allowing the USSR to buy up the New York Times, Washington Post, and major broadcast networks during the Cold War. No country with even a passing interest in its own security would allow this to happen, which is why it's time to ban TikTok and any other CCP-controlled app before it's too late. By the way, this exact same justification is why Russia kicked out all of the U.S. Social media networks.
Yeah.
Okay,
except
I'm for
YouTube.
it.
Yeah.
David Welch, you're up.
Yeah, well, we're talking a little bit about the fork in the road, and it was a prototype of a typical example of this is Apple, has a tremendous kind of wall of uncertainty and self-interest.
The biggest wall of uncertainty, probably, because that's probably the iPhone's probably emblematic of of American ingenuity and technology, but it gets right down to it.
Well, and there's so much that we've reported in this show that I actually haven't seen in a lot of other places. Like, for example, in that Foxconn factory that makes the iPhones, how a lot of the workers have been locked in. They've been prisoners inside the factory.
Well, there are actual suicide nets.
Yeah.
On the second and third stories of that building.
Yeah. And it's tragic for a company that is like so, woke with righteousness about, the well-being of humans on this planet. It's so interesting that they gloss over what's going on in the core of their own manufacturing facilities. And in fact, Tim Cook was in Congress actually testifying about this and is walking into the hearing. Billy, let's play Tim Cook's comments.
Hi, Mr. Cook. Do you support the Chinese people's right to protest? Do you have any reaction to the factory workers that were beaten and detained for protesting COVID lockdowns? Do you regret restricting airdrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government? Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
So answering any of those questions shouldn't have been that difficult. And for the audience, just to recall that if they understand,
we should point out he said nothing.
Nothing. No response.
Well, I kind of wish she asked something like, do you like steamed asparagus? Just to see if he answered it. Because then you have a way of measuring whether or not he's capable of answering a question.
Well, yeah, he's one of the most powerful men in the world. He ought to be able to, if he has such a righteous compass of humanity, he ought to be able to answer those questions.
Answer it? He can't answer it. Tim Cook cannot answer.
He didn't have to answer it on that spot,
question.
but he had to answer it. And he didn't.
Well,
he can't answer.
No,
I don't think he can.
I'm sure the Apple lawyers have instructed him to not say a word about anything involving human rights anywhere.
But the level of voice that he and that whole company has around social issues in the United States is loud.
Yes.
And for them not to have any voice at all about how their workers are treated at the Foxconn factory in China, I mean, that just seems a little above the pale. I'm sorry.
And beyond the pale, too.
Beyond the pale. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So,
and in between it also.
Yeah. Well, let's point out, though, careful.
pale.
There's something that was really important in that's important for the audience to know because they may not be fully aware of. The iPhone has a capability called AirDrop. And AirDrop is very powerful because if we're in proximity of each other and I take a movie and have a whole bunch of pictures, you can't send them by email because the file sizes are too big. But I can actually say, who's in my vicinity? Oh, Michael Olson and Billy Graff is in my facility of AirDrop. I'll push a button, and it goes from my phone to your phone directly within the proximity of the phones. Now, what the Chinese protesters were doing was using AirDrop to communicate amongst each other because the CCP had no control mechanisms to either ban
it avoids
or avoid.
To say it bluntly, it avoids the cell tower connection.
Yeah. It does. And it avoids all of the apparatus of government and the CCP of monitoring and curtailing the communication. So they put pressure, CCP came back to Tim Cook and put pressure on Apple, said, look, you need to turn this feature off.
In China.
In China, and they did.
So I go back to a question I've asked before. Given a choice, which direction, which fork in the road would Tim Cook take? Would he take the fork that leads to the United States of America or the fork that goes to the People's Republic of China?
And I have the answer.
Yeah.
Always the same example and answer. Follow the money.
I was going to say, listen to Grandpa Graff.
Grandpa Graff.
That's true. He is
Follow the money.
Yeah. He has a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders.
That's
yes,
right.
he
So
does.
if he went on Joe Rogan like another billionaire and started smoking joints and talking about freeing all the people in China, he would be in trouble with his shareholders. He also has a relationship to maintain with his manufacturers. I mean, he's stuck between a variety of very powerful entities. But it is worth noting that Apple's moving their manufacturing out of China. A lot of it's going to India. It's something like going from something like 3% of an iPhone to 25% of an iPhone in the near future will be manufactured in India. Oops.
Now, can I ask you a rhetorical question, Jonty?
Yeah.
In India, do you think the manufacturing setup will be any different than Foxconn in China.
Yes. It's a different culture. At Foxconn in China, the average worker works a 14-hour day, 6 days a week, and then they get their day off is a 10-hour day on Sundays, where they get a couple hours in the evening to go out and try and socialize and maybe meet a potential spouse.
Sounds like domestic servants in Singapore when I was there.
I cannot.
got the same
I don't
schedule.
foresee that being possible in India. I mean, India. There's some. India will end up with sort of the other problem where the facilities are poorly maintained, or there's still a lot of issues in India. But I don't believe the culture in India would tolerate that level of subservience to a.
You don't think the workers
so-called
will be
career.
taken advantage of, in other words?
Oh, I mean, the I
Workers
that's
are
like an
always
epic
taken
struggle that goes
advantage of.
way back. You know, that
Yeah.
goes back to feudalism, Billy. That won't suddenly come to an end, and it'll have its own flavor.
That's my point.
Right.
Yeah. Well, with respect to manufacturing, from what I've heard, manufacturing is in big trouble in China as we speak. And
Well, I think
part of the part of the-
Foxconn is the example of that.
is a great example. But orders from the U.S. are reportedly down
40%. Yeah, so so orders are dramatically down.
Well, I can ask a question which will directly bring it home for David. David, on your airplane, would you install an engine made in China?
Not a chance, and most other
I
pilots
rest
wouldn't
my
either.
case. I rest my case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So orders are down, and it's not just because of quality; it's because there's not that much money. Ships are evidently coming back empty. Ships are, some of them are not even sailing because they don't have enough stuff coming this way, which is truly amazing.
Yes, what a difference from a year ago when there was too much stuff and they're parked out in the port of Long Beach for miles.
That probably a lot of that probably has to do with our economic situation here.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
People not having any money to spend on cheap Chinese crap.
Hey, if you don't want to, if you want to pay your mortgage, you don't want to buy cheap Chinese stuff coming in on the ship.
Well, also too, the stock market was down a bit today, and because retail sales were a little soft. And as you remember, the ships that were stacked up in the harbors, the container ships, well, some of those were out there for months. Well, they got unloaded and finally got through our supply chain, and so the retailers had too much stuff. They had these huge sales in the fall. A lot of people bought up early for Christmas. They're not reordering anymore because people have already satiated themselves for the holidays. There is enough inventory, and then with the downturn in the economy, nobody wants to be caught with excess inventory. A lot of states like California, you have to pay tax on your inventory.
Yeah.
And so people don't want to get stuck with excess inventory at the end of their fiscal
Inventories,
years.
end of year sales.
Exactly.
Billy Graff, you're up next.
Well, we're talking about India. India is now blaming Chinese troop encroachments after a big border problem they had. They had a little border clash. And the Indian and Chinese troops have again been clashing along the Himalayan border. Now, boy, I tell you, think about this for a minute. The last place in the world you want to fight a border clash.
Yeah, let's climb a mountain. And then
Is go to the highest mountain range in the world where you freeze.
Right. Well, the last time this happened, when was that? Back in it was a while ago. I think it was like June of 2020.
Yeah.
20 Indians died because the Chinese soldiers started throwing them into a river. Now, I don't know what a river is like in the Himalayan mountains.
It's cold.
But I've got a feeling it's not the sort of situation where you're likely to even survive a little skinny dip,
No, it'd be like, falling through the ice fishing hole in Minnesota.
Well, they tell us in Minnesota, if you fell into Lake Superior, even in the summertime, you'd live about 5 minutes. You'd die of hypothermia.
And the Himalayas are considerably colder than Minnesota. Yeah. Anyway, so they had this border clash and reports of hand-to-hand combat. They were actually, fighting hand-to-hand. They were throwing punches at each other. Anyway, so India's defense minister, a name I can't pronounce, is Mr. Singh. That's all I know. I can't say his first name to save my life. Anyway, his country's parliament was addressed by Mr. Singh on Tuesday. The incident is said to have taken place in a remote outpost on this past Friday. Anyway, he described the clashes that began after Chinese troops encroached into Indian territory.
You know, what flashed into my mind are the Crips and the Bloods.
What if they had a snowball fight
They
up there?
crossed the street, and basically they crossed the wrong river, and they got into somebody else's, and it's basically, you're right. It is this little territorial part of the Chinese army and a territorial little part of the Indian army.
I think with GPS, I'd know where the edges of the.
Well, yes, but they don't have an edge. What they have is a line of actual control. There's no official border.
That's right.
And so, I mean, does this valley belong to us or them? And for some dumb reason, they keep getting into these silly little fights, and it really is kind of comical to watch. I mean, if you guys see, it's like they're running these soldiers. Look, you got the two of the most powerful militaries in the world, nuclear armed, highly advanced weapon systems, and they're running up and whacking each other in the head with sticks.
Yeah, or
snowballs.
They were literally throwing ice balls at each other.
Oh my God!
So the Bloods and the Crips doesn't work because the Bloods and the Crips would be shooting each other. Now I was really curious about what the heck, like why don't they just shoot each other? And I guess they signed an agreement in 1996.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And it's like Article 6 of that says neither side shall open fire, cause degradation. Degradation, excuse me, use hazardous chemicals, conduct blast operations, or hunt with guns and explosives within 2 kilometers of the line of actual control.
Now, let me give you just
old-fashioned melee is okay.
Before we go too farther into this, I just want to describe the location.
Okay.
This is near a 17,000-foot mountain peak.
Whoa.
It's really cold there.
And really thin air. So you have to breathe a lot to get
I'm on oxygen on my plane when I'm flying that high.
Yeah. Apparently, in June of a couple of years ago, 20 Indian soldiers and an unknown number of Chinese were killed in the same region in the bloodiest brawl in that river valley. And like Jonty said, how most of them died was freezing in the river.
Well, so once you get wet, though, even if you pulled out of the river, it's curtains.
Hey, John, do you want to pick up on which countries are most influenced by China?
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
we're not on the list.
We're on the list.
Yeah, good.
Are we really?
I'm sure you're shocked. Yeah, well, there was an organization in...
I'm being facetious.
Yeah. Knock me down with a feather.
There's an organization in Taiwan, based out of Taiwan, which Taiwan tends to have a bit of a bias when it comes to China, but it's we tend to be biased on their side. So I'm all ears basically. A group called Doublethink Labs came up with a way of measuring the influence that China has over other countries. And a lot of the times folks tend to do things like look at military agreements or economic agreements or level of economic trade, and that's it. These folks came up with 9 different categories that they used to look at the influence of China in these areas, which includes higher education, domestic politics, economic ties, foreign policy, law enforcement, media, military cooperation, cultural links, and technology. Using those metrics and whatever way that they sort of came up with this measurement, they ranked 82 countries in terms
Who's
of
least? Which country is least influenced by China?
out of the 82, Paraguay, and then close behind North Macedonia. I'd like you guys to just point out North Macedonia on a map real quick.
I can't even point out Paraguay. I know it's somewhere in South America.
Yeah, I didn't know North Macedonia was.
You know what?
its own
It
entity,
seems
honestly.
like those countries with the least to steal are the least influenced by China.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That would be an interesting way to analyze this same map. I'm not sure. I'm seeing really close there. Colombia, Senegal. It's got oil. Sweden, and
Blondes.
Finland. have got
the bikini team.
they've got the bikini team. They've also got advanced semiconductors.
Well, they're geopolitically very centrally focused, also.
Right.
The most influenced by China by far is Pakistan, way out ahead, followed shortly thereafter by Cambodia, Singapore.
What does
and
Pakistan
Thailand.
have to offer China?
They counterbalance India, and they don't have a lot of friends.
Okay.
And they're also Belt and Road critical, and they've been trying to build a massive port system in southern Pakistan. I think that's called Baluchistan. Anyway, Pakistan's geostrategic in a lot of ways.
Right.
South Africa is sixth.
Wow.
So, and it's also the most influenced African country.
Minerals.
And then we've got out of the Europeans, Germany's actually way out ahead at 19th. I don't even know if there's, is that Australia? They put Australia at 12th. But I got to tell you guys something strange here. I can't really get their website to load. I don't know if there's some weird hack going on or what, but I'm scared to even hit reload here. It's not properly loading, I'll tell you that. It's like a semi-broken site, and it seems, I don't know if they...
Well, while you're waiting for that, what I'll do is I'll talk about my story before we go into the break here. Really quickly, I'm looking at Blackrock CEO is being told to resign by state treasurers. Why? Because as a investment firm, BlackRock owes a fiduciary responsibility to its investors.
Oh, you're talking about the state
U.S.
pension program.
Yes, pension programs. And the idea is that when you take money from the state, your job is to make money with that money. That's your fiduciary responsibility.
And you would think to invest it in U.S. companies.
Well, or wherever, but
Chinese coal power plants.
BlackRock, of course, is controlled by Larry Fink. And Larry Fink is a principal player in foreign investments in China. No telling how much money he has invested of our pension funds in those empty apartment buildings in China.
God, let's hope not.
But he's invested enough of our money into China so that China has allowed him to become the only person to be able to open up a outside owned municipal fund.
It's the only fund in China operating owned by an outside China company.
But the really weird thing about him is his power as a investment guru. This is what one of the state treasurers said about Larry Fink. He said, to meet this end, the asset management company BlackRock has leaned heavily into environmental, social, and governance standards, known as ESG, to help police who should and who should not gain access to capital. So in effect, he's become like the Xi Jinping of money.
Somebody's upset that he invested in the 54 coal-fired power plants in China.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I think he's the most aptly named person to run that kind of a company of all time.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was our first hour. Our second hour belongs to you. As you know, you pick up your phone at dial 479-1080. Our challenge for you today on this, the Fork in the Road edition of China Watch Radio, the question is, will the Chinese allow themselves to be governed by an emperor who has no clothes? Or will they stand up like raucous soccer fans and demand freedom from the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party? What do you think? 831-479-1080. Join us.
You're listening to AM 1080, KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Coming up, difficult. Currently, the temperature at KSCO is 55 degrees, and we expect partly sunny weather for the remainder of the afternoon. Tonight, mostly cloudy skies, an overnight low somewhere about 37 degrees, and we're only expecting a high temperature right around where it is now in the upper 50s. So keep all that in mind. You might want to not lose track of that sweater. And your Friday will be mostly sunny with a high temperature only about 60 degrees or so. That is the latest national news, traffic, and weather from the KSCO newsroom. Time now for hour number 2 of China Watch Radio. China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Chanchilai, woman with a lighter. This is the second hour of China Watch Radio, and we are back to have some fun because it's your hour. Pick up your phone and join us today. Tell us what you see happening in the world. Answer our very, very tough question. You know, just in the last 2 weeks, it appears as though Xi Jinping has fallen into pieces. If you think about how magnificently strong he looked at the party congress.
Very well orchestrated.
Totally orchestrated.
Well, when he got rid of his number one.
Yeah, when he got rid of Hu Jintao.
Right in front. I mean, these two big dudes got up and escorted that boy out of the room.
Yeah. Xi Jinping looked over at Xi and says, is this what you're doing? And Xi like nods yes and looks straight ahead like a stone.
Yep.
You know.
So magnificent control. Yes. And the magnificent control afforded him with his COVID-0 policy welds people's doors shut so they can't get out
and beat their dog to death.
Oh, yeah. See, that was the one that got me. And you guys know that.
Oh,
that's why
you
you
were
keep bringing
torn
it up.
Yeah.
I was torn up.
Yeah.
That was the worst video I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And it just, wow, man, really, it was pointless.
But something happened somewhere along the line, and I really do think the video from the Qatar World Cup soccer had a lot to do with
it.
The final straw.
The final straw. All of those people,
thousands
were
of people
welded
having fun out in the
rooms,
open, no masks,
having fun, yelling, screaming, shouting, spitting into the air. Yeah. Oh my goodness, breaking all the laws, and then the apartment burning down too.
Yeah,
and the people unable to get out, the firefighters unable to get in.
Yeah.
Very emblematic,
very tragic
of the fix that the Chinese people.
And the Chinese people saw something during the soccer matches that they don't see generally in their country. At least I don't think they do. Mm-hmm. When a player gets yellow carded, right? Well, they got yellow carded, and in their culture, whoa, that's bad, right? But the player turns around and screams at the ref.
Yeah.
While he's getting yellow carded, which means, oh wow, people other parts of the world can actually complain.
You push back against the whole machine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, things started falling apart. Once people figured out that the emperor had no clothes, that he had no way of controlling COVID, that he had no plan of action, that what he was doing was not doing right.
Well, Michael, if you think about this, that appearance of invincibility has fallen across. Look at poor Tim Cook, right? I mean, look at Apple. They looked implacable as this perfect product company, doing all the right, socially responsible, doing all the right things. ESG, right? I mean, they've got Al Gore on the board of directors to make sure that they're economically or ecologically compliant.
Well, I hear Jonty chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure, and likewise the situation with Larry Fink. I'm seeing that Blackrock's total assets in their holding or whatnot is down 11% or something like that. I mean, it's down to a paltry 8.4 billion, trillion dollars. But at the same time, Xi isn't the only emperor who's being exposed as being a little underdressed.
And so. Wrong button there. That's Billy. We saw you hit the button.
That's essentially not me. I didn't do it.
Not me. I didn't do it. Yellow card.
Yeah. So the facade is gone. I mean, if you're Xi Jinping, how do you get your face back? How do you stand up to the world and say, I'm Xi Jinping, Emperor of the Red Dynasty?
Taiwan?
Well, the other.
Taiwan?
Sorry, David?
No, I said, what do you do? It's like maybe invade Taiwan.
Oh,
change the
well,
dynamic.
the other facade, the other sort of theoretical emperor that's being exposed is the U.S. dollar. I don't think Taiwan's that big of a goal. I think that for China to enter into a new kind of Eastern-based Bretton Woods system with all of the BRICS countries, it's like the BRICS plus 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 at this point in time because they just left Xi just left Saudi Arabia after an incredibly successful meeting, building all sorts of economic ties and making plans for the next millennium. So,
do you think that our politicians realize that their prolific spending of all of the money that they don't have is having a impact on the decomposition of our dollar? Do you think it registers to them, or are they just?
It's almost an exact parallel with the situation with COVID, where they just kept pushing this absurd narrative to the point where everybody just said, "Okay, we're done." And in the case of the zero COVID policy in China, "we're done" was all of the people just walking out into the streets and saying, "I don't bloody care anymore." And in the case of the U.S. dollar hegemony, it's all of the BRICS countries, which is, we're talking about the majority of the world's population and the majority of the world's economy, saying we're done with this system of quasi taxation that you guys have had us under.
And it's a very real taxation too. So we're going to go to the phones, and the phone number is 831-479-1080. We're wondering who's calling us.
Well, we have now that I've got the phone thing squared away. I can't believe I did that. Oh well, I only installed the equipment. Let's check in with Mary. Mary, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, Mary.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good to hear your voices.
Well,
Thank you.
good to be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think the lockdowns had anything to do with zero policy for COVID in China. I think it was about stopping a bank run. If you look at where they were locking people into their apartments, it was in the more tech industry neighborhoods. And I wonder how many bank accounts they emptied out.
Ooh. That's a very good point.
And Billy, follow the money.
Yeah.
So I haven't read anything. So my question for you all is, have you?
No. I have seen mention of the fact that one of the reasons they were locking people down is to prevent runs on the banks.
Yeah.
Because the banks don't have any money.
Runs and protests.
And protests.
Well, there were several instances where folks in mass showed up at banks to get their money and were told you're not getting it.
Yeah.
Well, we did that story, Tanks to the Banks. Remember where they actually put armor around the banks to keep people away?
Yeah.
Boy, that's a very good point, Mary.
Probably. Good point, Mary. And you think that'll happen here? Can't happen here, can it?
Well, we do have rules, the FDIC and the rest of them are all supposed to be protecting us. We have a guarantee of what, 10 grand to
$100,000.
$100,000 an account. So.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at what the Democrats are putting out there right now, they're slapping it around. They're talking about moving all of our retirement funds to guess where?
Blackrock.
Security.
To where?
Social Security.
Ah.
Oh.
They will have total control over your 401s, your everything. Any retirement account that you have will be now in a pot.
Boy.
And, it'll be similar to what they've done with our medical industry.
Right.
Boy, there'll be so many people fighting that one.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Nope, we are too lazy and fat. I'm sorry, Billy.
Well, who fought Xi Jinping's zero COVID?
Yeah.
Who fought Obama's health care program? Nobody.
Well, it's because so many people didn't have any health care.
Nobody won.
Yeah. I think the reason there wasn't a big fight on the Obamacare was the fact that there were so many people in the country that didn't have health care. Anything looked better than nothing.
All they had to do was go down to a hospital or wherever they got health care, and we, the taxpayers and
True.
insurance payers, we paid for it.
Yeah, that is
what
true.
We have now is not the doctor that I want. What we have now is not the health care that I want. All I have to do is go on Nextdoor and see how nobody can get into a doctor to get an antiviral to fight COVID right now. They're talking about going to doctors on duty instead of their own health care program.
Yeah.
No, our health insurance has gone to hell in a handbasket, and so will our retirement.
You know, Mary, you brought up a really interesting parallel between China and Russia and the United States. And I've always thought of the two countries as mirror images of each other, kind of looking across the Pacific Ocean at each other. And it appears as though, you know, we're kind of going, in many respects, seem to be going down the same rabbit hole of misery that China is too.
I was wondering what word you were going to use there.
Well, anytime you like to Mary's point, anytime you centrally
Centralize
control
authority.
things, right? You turn, you know, everything into some kind of homogenated goo, right? It's the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Great call, Mary.
Yeah, thank you.
Call back anytime.
We
Merry
had
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. We had another call. That person, for some reason, dropped off, and realistically, I didn't go near the phone bank this time.
You didn't drop them?
No.
Oh,
So,
I think
please,
831-479-1980. Pick up your phones.
something you want to ask
Weigh
us?
in on where we're at in the world.
Well, we should remind the audience as well that this is our last live broadcast under KSCO.
Oh,
The station,
or at
Exactly
least
what
for
I was
sure.
going to say.
yeah, station's going to be closing,
Yeah.
and or at least to this format, and
Yeah.
we're going to be taking the
To
next
the
couple of weeks
extent
off.
that we know what's going on.
We
yeah.
don't, and we don't.
We
Obviously,
don't know what's going on.
We
So,
don't. That's
but
not
it
our-
is going to be the last China Watch Radio of the year. And as long as we started it off, we may as well run with it and have a few words that what we think. First of all, I personally would like to say to you out there, thank you for allowing me to spout out a little bit about China. There was a time in my life where I thought it was going to make China my life, and spent 3 years studying Chinese in a very intensive way. And I even took art classes, and I even learned how to do calligraphy, and I had a calligraphy art show. So I was very much enamored by China. But in my studies, I had instructors. This wonderful woman, Qingyi Doherty, and Qingyi was this beautiful classic Mandarin woman who you could just tell she had a lot of knowledge in her mind. And so when I would get excited about something that was happening in China, she would look at me with those eyes, and she would point me as to in a direction of what was really happening. And I realized that I could, and this was during the Great Cultural Revolution, when nothing was getting out, right?
no firsthand.
No information was coming out unless you knew somebody. I mean, it was totally locked. It was. You think Facebook is bad, and how Twitter works, and boy, nothing was getting out. It was like a black star, a black hole, sucking everything in. But you got the information. If you had help, you knew what was going on inside China, and it was frightening.
Yeah.
It was frightening to me because I'm a contrarian. I'm working here. I'm a contrarian. I love to disagree. If everybody's going north, I want to be going south. And there's no room for that in a totalitarian dictatorship such as China. So I kind of gave up and moved on with my life. And then here I am, somehow enjoying the conversations on China Watch Radio with a bunch of blokes trying to figure out what the heck's going on over there. because now more information is coming out, but it's all purified information that's getting out and being disseminated to us by our media. So my comment on this last day of the year for China Watch Radio was, thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I'm honored to be part of your world. Billy.
You know, it's funny you say that. I've had the great fortune to have adventuresome parents who took my brother and my sister and I around the world. And, you know, we landed in the South Pacific, where the sphere of influence that we talk about every day on this program was our lives. I remember sitting on the T-Dock in Palau, T-Dock being one of the main entry points from the ocean in the harbor. And I was sitting on T-Dock, and I watched a couple of boats come into the harbor in Palau. And there's no other way to describe this. You really can't be gentle about it or kind. These things were garbage scow fishing boats. They were just barely floating. They were smelly. These guys had been at sea for a long time. And they came in, and we soon realized that they were, in fact, fishing illegally. They were looking for a place to get rid of the fish they had just caught illegally in the Palau archipelago, and they got into some serious trouble with the Palauan police, basically. And I realized then, living in this little country, you know, that things were different. Rules were different.
Yeah.
Culture was different.
And think of the difference in the size of the fishing fleets coming out of China now.
Precisely what I was going to in this particular discussion on this particular program, because when I say in our discussions about China and the United States, when I say things like, I don't think they're going to shoot a missile any farther than the coast of Japan, for instance, because if they aimed one toward Guam, it would, wherever that missile came from, would turn up being a cinder block, because I've lived out there and I've seen it. So, but I love the discussion we've had on this program about economies, Australia, China, Taiwan,
and following the dollar,
following the money,
following
the money, because you know, when you get right down to it, there's certain axioms that are going to work no matter what.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Follow the money. If you're poor, you're going to follow the money. If you're rich, you're going to follow the money. If you're, yeah. Anyway, same thing with Michael. I would like to thank our audience, because of all the programs we have on this radio station where you get a lot of political back and forth, and you get a lot of pointing the finger at this guy and pointing the finger at that guy, and the discussion sometimes implodes on itself. This discussion on this program, when Jonty puts his particular point of view into the thing, when I put my point of view in, I think we have a legitimate, constructive discussion.
You know what the difference is, Billy? I think on China Watch Radio, we all recognize the fact that we don't know what the heck is going on.
True.
And we're trying to figure it out together.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to figure things out together, you're part of a team. And so we can disagree because none of us knows for sure what's going on.
Exactly.
Anyway.
That's very well said, Michael. And more to the point, I think that
I can pick up the pace. Yeah.
Hang on.
One of the things that I think we've discovered is that through the warm reaction we've had from our audience locally and abroad, we've had many calls from Australia as well, is that there's a need. There's a need for that sort of trying to figure it out together journalism, especially with regards to U.S.-China relations. And because there was a need, we came together and we developed a service. And because we developed a service and continued to do it over a period of time, we've developed skills. And I hope that our audience doesn't think that we're just going to sit on our hands. because we've got the skills. We know there's a need. We want to provide the service. So please do keep in touch with us.
How?
And by far the best way to do that is to go to the ChinaWatchRadio.com website and sign up for the newsletter. Whatever happens going out into the future, we're not entirely sure at this point in time, but we will get in touch with you and let you know if you're signed up for that newsletter. Any other way that you might be following us, I'm not too sure about.
Smoke signals from Loma Prieta Mountain.
And programs, there are many programs now around the world because there's so many choices, right? But there are some programs that started out awfully small and ended up being awfully big. And just keep that in mind. Keep in touch with us because, we want to continue to have this discussion with you.
That's right.
Shall we take a phone call?
Yeah.
Okay. Dan in Felton. Had to put on my bifocal to see the very small screen. Dan, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. I was hearing an announcement in the background. Bad day. But, my comment is, besides, I'd like to talk about the end of the program, end of the station as we know it. This is kind of directed to Michael about the U.S. and China going down the same hole. Stalin said that. Stalin said in his last days, and I kick myself for not knowing the reason, but he said, now I understand why nothing got done. He made the same type of rotten mistakes that Mao did, say with the kulaks and all that. But Michael has often mentioned about the oligarchs, and it seems to me that's what's behind it, because yes, seem to be going down. China seems to be going down. I was enamored with Russia, and the more I studied it, I haven't lost interest, but I won't go there.
Well, Dan, I'd like to address that because it's been something I've been scratching my head over for a while. Oligarchs, which are those people who are intimately connected with the powers that be. So when you centralize a government, you end up with a Xi Jinping or whoever. It doesn't matter, because when you're in total charge, you can't do anything. It just doesn't work. You need people who can do things. And so you bring them in and tell them to do things for you, and they do things for you, so you make them powerful, and you make them very powerful. And I thought, look at Larry Fink and how powerful Larry Fink is. He's now in control of so many of America's companies by virtue of the shares that Blackrock owns in them. So he's become an oligarch of money.
Well, in fact, you know how powerful he is. If you just think about this, is always a test for me of power. Could he pick up the phone and get any world leader to answer?
Of course.
Exactly.
Of course.
Could any world leader call him and expect to get an answer?
Not necessarily.
Maybe. But at any rate, once you become that powerful, then you suck up all of the energy. You become the only source of anything.
You block out the sun.
You block out the sun, and everybody else starves by virtue of your power. And it's interesting to see that Russia has really been going through it with its oligarchs, and how Putin has been going through them. So at any rate, Dan, thank you so much. Don't want to talk about the end of the program. Don't want to talk about the end of the station. But I want to thank you for being a great fan of the radio station and China Watch Radio. You the man, Dan.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much, and I do get your newsletter.
Good.
I'll be glad to stay in touch. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, let's move on then. Oh, wait, you know what? Let's take a break. I'll ask our two callers, Joe and Mike, to hang on while we take care of some business because After all, that's why we're here, partially anyways.
We'll take a quick one.
We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right
They
back.
call them quickies.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant Kaito.
Experience the extraordinary. Travel with Shen Yun to discover 5,000 years of wisdom, beauty, drama, and humor live on stage. You're not just watching a performance. You are witnessing a culture reborn. Come see what the modern world has never seen. The beauty and wonder of China before communism. Coming to San Francisco, San Jose, and Berkeley, starting on December 26th. Shenyun.com/CA. SHENYUN.com/CA.
Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
This is Kristen with the Elephant in the Room radio show.
And this is Chris. Guess what's back?
Our second annual Christmas toy drive for the Pajaro Valley Shelter.
What a great idea to help give toys to deserving kids in our county.
Please find it in your hearts to donate a new and unwrapped gift by bringing the toys to the KSCO station during operation hours.
We will take them all to the shelter headquarters for them to wrap. Easy peasy for everyone. What a great way to make a kid's Christmas bright.
So please have the toys here at the station by Thursday, December 15th.
And we will take them to the shelter. Thank you and Merry Christmas to everyone. Helping less fortunate kids is a great way to celebrate.
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas!
Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Well, folks, the sun sets mighty early these days. That means we're all spending a lot more time indoors, watching TV, surfing the net, working out in the shop, in general, using up a lot of electricity. So let's ask Chris Jensen from JM Electric what all our indoor time portends for the electrical circuits behind our walls.
You are right, Charlie. We do spend a lot more time indoors in winter. And the more time we spend indoors, the more load we put on the electrical circuits that run throughout our homes. It's really important that our electrical circuits are up to carrying winter's load, because if they are not, well, every year thousands are injured or killed by home electrical fires.
How can we know if our electrical circuits are up to carrying the load, Chris?
First, folks can go to jmelectric.com and take the home electrical safety test. After they answer 12 simple yes or no questions, they will have a good idea about how safe they should feel. Second, folks can call JM Electric at 422-7819 and ask for a free current safe home assessment.
And be sure and tell them Charlie sent you.
Are you interested in a radio show with tips and tools to help you unravel the mysteries of your personal finances? Would getting a firm understanding of the basic laws of money management help you out? Then listen to Money Moves on Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Host Pamela Fugit-Hetrick and her guests provide information so that you can successfully manage your own money. Tune in to Money Moves Thursdays at 7 p.m. on KSCO AM 1080 Santa Cruz.
Lida. This is China Watch Radio, and it's the last half hour. David, start us off.
Well, thanks, gentlemen. This has been a real joy and a pleasure to be part of this team and part of this program as the last addition here to the set. You know, Michael, I really appreciate how you've anchored this program and put together the topics for the week. And Billy, your sense of practicality, your views on things have really, I think, just brings, I think, a lot of the stories we have brings it home. You know, and Johnny, your international view, trying to, get us out of our information bubble inside the USA to think externally is, I know, something I've really appreciated. Yeah. And I've enjoyed trying to bring a little bit of my end of knowledge of traveling and working in the region and some, strategic view to this as well. And so, gentlemen, this has been a great ride so far here on KSCO, and we'll look forward to moving forward in the future and when we replatform somewhere.
To the future.
Yeah.
Well, David, I found it interesting that we got a couple calls last week saying that they missed you on the show.
Don't tell them that. It'll go to his head.
They didn't miss. Well, let me finish now because I found it very interesting. They didn't miss your intelligence or your articulence or your geostrategic perspective. What they all missed was your laugh.
Oh,
actually, that's part of the fun of this program is we can all say something we really believe, and it either hits home or people just go, huh?
And the camaraderie on the team is fantastic. Just for the audience, we're all friends. We all get along great.
Well, I think we should just do a show where we all just make you laugh. I mean,
how do you do that?
China, MakeDavidLaugh.com.
There you go.
Kind of like a Tickle Me Elmo. Yeah. Good.
I don't think we'll go that far.
Okay.
Well, we are in our last half hour, so pick up your phone, call 831-479-1080, and let us know what you think. We're going to miss you.
All right. Let's go to the phones. Joe has been waiting through the break, and Joe, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, Joe.
Okay. One of you brought up the subject of fish, and I tried to ask this question last Saturday after 9 o'clock on Michael's show, and they told me it's pre-recorded, and Michael doesn't take calls anyway. So I'll ask this question to see if you want to answer it. What are the negatives to farm-raised fish, particularly trout, because I buy that at Trader Joe's?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
well, there's a number of things. First and foremost, in my mind, is the water.
Yeah.
Now, there's a trout farm up in Idaho that I've seen and featured in my book, Metro Farm. That's absolutely beautiful, stunning water. The next thing is what you feed them. Now, the water in the Idaho farm, it flows freely, right? So it's moving right through the fish beds. So the fish have to swim against it. And that means that there's no contaminants that build up in the beds, which means you don't have to feed the fish antibiotics.
That's the big thing.
Which is a big thing. But the big thing is what you do end up feeding the fish, because trout, are not grain eaters per se. So if you're feeding a trout grain and stuff like that, you're going to have a confused metabolism in the fish. So that's what gets me about farmed fish, is always the water quality, the chemicals that you have to feed the fish to keep them, they're swimming around in their own fecal matter and whatnot.
Well, in certain cases,
in certain cases,
not in that farm you're talking about. But
and salmon especially, I'm just such a lover of salmon. To see salmon from fish farms is really always depressing.
Yeah, and with their big tanks, it's particularly problematic. There are some, like in Norway, there's a lot of salmon farms that are actually out in the ocean. In the fjords.
I've seen those.
And most of those are a little better because, like to your point, there's just current flowing through them. They have to swim. They're huge, by the way. The fish aren't all on top of each other. Right. They actually have room to swim, and they get the right food. And
So those are my observations. What about you? What do you think?
Okay, what I really don't like is the way I have to pick fish is the fish with the least amount of mercury in it. That's why I was eating sardines, because they're,
good.
They don't eat, they get eaten. And I thought maybe the farm-raised trout or salmon or whatever, they're not eating the mercury-filled plant life or other fish. So that's why I figured maybe it's safer to eat farm-raised.
That's probably not a bad idea. However, the mercury from China, where that ends up, right? It ends up in our waterways, comes right across the Pacific Ocean.
Would you eat a canned fish from China?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Would you eat a sardine from China? No.
Don't think so.
So those are significant considerations.
Are you saying these fish can pick up mercury just through the water or just from what they eat?
Both. And that's one of the things about fish, long-living fish at sea, is that they pick up contaminants in the water, and they pick up mercury that way. It's the longer-living fish. So you're really smart eating sardines, but don't eat them all, because I like them too.
Oh, boy, I have some
Come
great
on, there's plenty to go around.
Yeah, there are. There are plenty to go around. Joe, we appreciate the
Thanks
question.
for the call, Joe.
Okay.
Thank you. It's interesting. My grandfather would go fishing with my father and I a couple times. We went out, but mostly with my dad when my dad was younger and had a fishing trawler. And they tell the story. My dad particularly tells the story about my grandfather, who's an old Danish guy, and they would get on the boat, and my grandfather would make lunch for whoever had gone fishing with them, right? And the lunch usually was a, loaf of bread and some mayo and some kipper snacks or some sort of fish, right?
You don't need mayo.
And he would make the sandwich with the head sticking out of one side and the tail out the other, and he'd hand it to whoever it was. And my dad said it was just great to watch them chum when they got the sandwich.
All right, who's next?
All right, let's talk to Mike.
831-479-1080.
Mike, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, I wanted to kind of raise a inquiry here for a little food for thought and reflection. The organization, Larry Fink's organization, is called Blackrock. Are you guys aware of the practice of the Cabal Blackstone and its purported origins of the Blackstone? This goes all the way
now,
back.
Isn't Blackstone a real estate investment trust?
No, let me read this real quick.
Okay.
The Muslims believe that Allah ordered the Kaaba or the black stone, or the Kaaba, the booth constructed, and the black stone goes. The story goes that the stone was purportedly part of the stones from heaven that actually came down to earth, and it was a touch point. It was originally white, but it became black because of the sins of the people in touching it. And so it's interesting
metaphor.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just I think in pictures sometimes that Larry Fink is communicating in financial centers and currencies regarding the world. To me, when you ask what's going on, what they're doing, I believe that they're establishing centers of what would you say, financial vectoring for the Great Reset, and they'll consider themselves financial priests to actually, the sins of the debt of the people and redistribution of wealth. And that might tie in with part of the dimension of what George Bush said, 1,000 points of light, these touch points of Rome-Ext, purported centers of democracy. These guys, they consider themselves, what would you say, lords of the universe.
Gods. Gods. They're oligarchs.
Yeah, so they would justify themselves, the people's sins, for their financial debt and these, countries trafficking in, fiat currency. We need to forgive their financial sit-down, debt, sin, and we will decide the criteria for what the reset is and what any store value margins are.
Very interesting symbolism.
Do you think China is part of the Great Reset?
I think China's a grounds where what's happened is that land and that country has been through so much change that it's almost like a no loyalties, what would you say, sketchboard for being able to do things like Maurice Strong and others. They can have a station point to blueprint their new plan for a new American century, but also too for a new world order and an integrated system where we're no longer considered, human beings are no longer considered the spiritual beings. They're just bioelectrical units on the motherboard of technocracy.
Well, it's going to take me a while to figure out how to disagree with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Take my call, guys.
All right, Mike,
awesome.
thanks for the call. All right, frequent caller to this program and others, Marcia, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yes, hello, it's Marcia from Los Gatos.
Hey, Marcia.
That's in California, folks. And I'm so grateful to be able to have listened and been a part of, KSCO and the wonderful people in the area. I want to say that I've had China on my mind since I was a little child.
Why?
And I was told to eat all the food on your plate.
Okay, there you go.
Me too.
Because the children in China are starving, and you must appreciate what you have. And I think it put me into the healing arts. And it put me into learning Chinese medicine and practicing Qigong and other life force energy studies to learn more about the human experience. And I was so involved that I got involved when they first started trading from their country. I'm a gem and mineral dealer, and I know what the Blackrock is. It's a tektite.
and it falls to the ground, and you can see it splattered around, and so do the iron meteorites as well that are black stone. Those are metal. The others are more like volcanic glass. The tektites you can open up, and they're opalized on the inside.
Right,
when they're cut as a stone, they're just fantastic. But also what I wanted to say was, we think of people all around the world. We hear about them. We never know if our news is correct or what they learn about us is correct. And I think it comes full circle to me. I'm going to wonder, are we Americans going to be able to stand up and ask for our rights to be given to us? Will we get the Bill of Rights back again in our homes? Will America and all the people in America be able to eat all the food on our plates and not worry about China and the rest of the world starving? We should all see the whole earth with peace and prosperity and put down the tricks that cause death and sorrow, and let's all stand together as human beings.
That's a fantastic prayer.
My happy Merry Christmas to
May-
all of you guys,
Martian,
and I love you all.
Love you too.
Beautiful,
Now, don't
Marcia.
run off, because I want to ask you a question.
Yes, Michael.
As a person of the light, when you look at what we see going on, and what we've been talking about this afternoon, especially the Great Reset, is the Great Reset of the light or of the darkness?
Well, if you look at some of the most beautiful words in the book, God asked for, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And God spread light into the darkness, and all else was created, both good and evil, is a creation of the Master that we'll all search for in our lives.
Mary,
I believe that we will continue to wonder, but remember, we're only given 120 years or so.
Marcia,
and then we're gone.
Marcia, I had a biblical scholar once who said, he was talking about the darkness and the light, and he says, there is no combat between the dark and the light. It's as soon as the light presents itself, the dark flees.
Exactly.
It's true.
Yes, I love your voices. Please just let us know again. We won't be stopped from hearing yours.
And you signed
and
up
I
for the
think
newsletter.
we're all, yes,
We'll tell you where we are in the newsletter when we know.
We're all looking to be free and known. And so will, thy truth be told.
Thank you for the call.
Love
Beautiful.
you guys.
Love you too. Thank you.
I do want to say one thing in the wake of Marcia's call. Having still being a proud member of a farming family.
Yeah.
I feel pretty good about the fact that over the years, my family and others have fed the world. And I'm proud of the fact that in a tiny little way, not very big, because we don't have many apples anymore. But, some of my apples are in Martinelli's juice. And it goes around the world. And my dad had, over the years, we've grown everything from hay. When I was a little kid, I helped my dad bale hay. And he's grown row crops and all other kinds of things, including apples. And, there are lots of family farms like ours that have fed the world. We make more food in our country, so much so that we can outfeed the rest of the world.
There's a practical beauty to what you just said. That's wonderful, and it's real, and it's tangible. It's devoid of the nonsense of some of the politics that we've talked about and the world domination of some of these governments and control. It's really what you said is so fundamental and so beautiful. And Michael, in your book, Metro Farm, I've enjoyed reading about the case studies you had of small urban farms who are able to do what Billy was saying, to be able to, because you're on the edge of an urban area, obviously. And
most everybody is.
Yeah, but to be able to prosper. And that book is such an amazing insight into, how I can take a little piece of land and do something great with it, to do what you're saying, Billy, to really benefit humanity.
When I published that book, Marlene, my wife, said, "Look, you're 25 years too early."
No.
It's just about time.
Yeah. But I don't think you were 25 years too early. I think the people that do what my dad did, I like to go back to my family stories. My grandfather had a pretty big accounting practice in San Francisco, and he said to my dad, when my dad got old enough, and well, do you want the practice? I'll send you to Wharton, like that, and you can take over the business. And my dad said, "No, I want to be a farmer."
Yeah.
So I had
wow.
I had a good friend that I just met here when I first came here to go to school. His name is Nicholas Whitehead, and Nicholas is from South Africa. So halfway, he lived at a place called Halfway between Pretoria and some other big city. I don't know what it was, but they had a small farm. And he was talking about how he and his brother used to sell flowers on the road.
Oh, wow,
to
really?
people on the road, yeah.
Interesting.
A couple of farm kids. But boy, what you learn on a farm. And that's, to me, is the great tragedy of industrialization of the food chain, is that industrialization replaces people with money. With money you can buy machinery, with money you can buy chemicals, with money you can buy this and buy that. But when you replace people with money, what happens to the people? They move into town and hang around and wonder what to do.
You and I have talked about this off the air, and one of the things I think is missing in modern society around the world because of the movement to cities and industrialization.
And China.
You know what I learned? You know what the best thing my dad ever taught me, my mom and dad taught me? How to work.
I get up in the morning and go to work.
I still remember, I'm way past this now, but I still remember the tap on the shoulder when I was 5 years old. Get up, son. Time to go feed the critters.
Yep.
In China, what has happened over the last couple of decades is that the same thing that happened to us over probably close to 100 years, but in China it happened over a couple of decades, is that all of those people who lived on those small farms and had the knowledge of how to make money on those small farms, they sent their kids into town. The kids work in factories like...
Yeah.
Foxconn?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Foxconn.
That unknown factory we won't talk about.
And what a miserable life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens with the good people of Chunghua? What's going to happen to them when who's going to feed them?
You could ask the same question about some small little municipalities in rural America. The same things happen to them.
Same thing.
You talked about I think it was Bozeman, Montana, and how it's changed from when you were a kid there. He says now it's a big city.
I once had a speaking engagement in South Dakota, but I did a radio show from the Phil and Barbara Hamburger Ranch farm. They had 25,000 acres. Their house was like the bridge of an aircraft carrier.
Whoa.
So when all was said and done, I was driving through the little town, and they were having crazy days. And it was like noon.
Huh.
You know crazy days are, right?
Yeah.
All the stores put their stuff outside.
Yeah.
And I saw some Boy Scouts selling hot dogs, so I stopped and I ordered a hot dog and a Coke. And I said, how's business? And they said, you're the first person we've seen today. So those little towns are gone.
Yeah.
Are gone, So the kids are in town, and what do they do in town? And boy, you just look at what's happened to our culture because of that, you know.
You know, I fundamentally go back to the farm, to the ranch.
Yeah.
We called it the ranch. It was my mom and dad had 99 acres in the Sacramento River Delta, and boy, you learn so much.
You know,
you learn so much.
You know, I've learned a lot on this program too, working with you fine gentlemen. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to broadcast with you, sir. You know, my prayer is always to the people of China, the people of the United States,
Yep.
you know, that we have peaceful coexistence and that we're able to forge a way forward.
So we
together.
need to figure out how to stand up with the people of China against the oligarchs that are trying to run our lives. To hell with you.
Well, they're trying to run
Absolutely.
around the world lives.
Yes.
I mean,
heck with them.
I mean, talk to the Solomon Islanders.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to run roughshod over them too.
All of us.
Yeah.
John T.
John T.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just very contemplative and very appreciative of the time that we've spent together, and I couldn't agree more that the message of our show, hopefully, although we're very critical of the authoritarian aspects of China, is also to bring us all together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
and we love the culture. We love the people.
We've always said that you know the people of China is not who we're talking about. We're talking about their authoritarian government that doesn't allow for human rights.
So the question is,
anything.
do we speak any less favorably of our government than we do of Chinese government? I think we're equal opportunity
observers.
Boy, if you start talking about our government, you know what really bothers me, and I sort of keep it quiet when I'm on the air, but what really bothers me is, you know, everybody forgets that when we send these people to govern, you know, to take care of our business, they're our employees. Yeah. They're working for us. It's not the other way around.
That's right.
Yeah. And when it becomes the other way around, then we're in trouble.
We don't want to be the serfs.
There you go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know, this has been China Watch Radio. How many episodes have we done?
Oh, it's a little over 2 years. I believe.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot of episodes.
A lot of episodes of talking about China. You can talk about.
So, how can folks get a hold of us if they need to in the future?
Well, the thing to do is to sign up for the newsletter.
Right.
Go to ChinaWatchRadio.com and sign up for the newsletter. I don't really know what's going to happen. There's
none of us know
some
that.
Discussions about it, but if you're on that list, I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to get in touch with you in the future and let you know what the heck's going on.
And you know what? When it gets right down to it, that's all anybody can really say about the future is.
That's right.
I wonder what it holds in store.
Well, that's why it's the future.
That's why it's a fork in the road.
Fork in the road.
John T., I've had a great deal of fun working with you and Michael and David. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all, folks.
This is AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Stick around. Flight 1080's coming up.